All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev, Josh and Becker Friedman, for dedicating all the Shiurim and Joshua's this month, Le'ilui Nishmas, Josh's father, Yisrael Yehuda ben Harav Chaim Rafael. And to thank Sammy and Malka Esterson, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev, for dedicating the Shiurim and Joshua's this month in memory of their parents, Yitzchak Leib ben Aaron HaKohen, Sarah Rachel Bas Avram, Hinda Bas Henech Ephraim, and in the schus of the continued refuah and Hatzlacha, Mr. Moore and Esterson Ameh Be'esim Shalom Tovos. To thank the Pepper family for dedicating the Shu'urim and Drashos this month, the creation of the yard site of Yosef Pepper, Yosef David Zichron Lebracha ben Yaakov. To thank our week of learning sponsor, Steve Kolaskov, in commemoration of his father's first yard site, Nachum Sender ben Meshulam Nassan Meretz Hashem Shtav ben Aliyah, and the family Einachama. And to thank Ayala and Sarah Steinberg for dedicating the week of learning in the Schusar Refuah Shlema for Shulamis Bas Susha. I will say with that, let us begin. We have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Memtes. Memtes. Okay, there's also actually, if we have time, I'll take you back a little bit to some of the other, to one other sugya that we had yesterday. But let's first begin. Good. So we'll say, so let's go ahead. It said Mishnah, Memtes, Amud Aleph, Mishnah. Brand new parak. So we'll say, here we go. Now, this Mishnah is continuing along with now we're actually taking a little bit of a detour. Up until now, the focus of the last parak was very much on continuation of the parak before, which was focused on that when one takes a neder, prohibiting someone else from getting benefit from him, or to say differently, when one is subject to a neder hana, meaning they can't get benefit, so what's the halachic definition of hana? Here we're switching gears a little bit, and to focus a bit more on when you make a neder about something, how do we define the parameters of that something? So for example, hanodim in atavshil. Well, so let's say a person makes a neder, I'm not going to get benefit from tafshil. So we'll say, so remember again, we've already established, what's the guiding light principle in Nedarim? That b'Nedarim holchin achar lashon b'nei adam. When it comes to Nedarim, we go after the way people speak. So we'll say, so interestingly enough, so let's say what we're going to see is when a person says, I'm not going to eat tafshil, so ultimately, what do we look for? How do people commonly use the word tafshil? Right? How do they normally go ahead and use that particular word? So here we go. I don't do tafshil. So a person makes a neder not to get benefit from tafshil. Muter bitzli ubishalok. They are permitted to go ahead and get benefit from roasted food and shalok food. Okay, so we'll say what we're doing is we're defining tafshil by what it's not. Right? In other words, so tafshil doesn't cover tzli and shalok. So first of all, take a look at the Ran. So the Ran will say left-hand side, about halfway down the page. That's where the Ran for this parak starts. So the Ran says, Hanotim min hamushal mutar b'tzli v'tafshil she'inam bichlal lashon mavushal. So we're going to see tafshil doesn't include roasted foods, and it doesn't include shalok. What's shalok? Shalok, bashil velo bashil. So shalok means something that is not fully cooked. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, if you make a neder, not to eat tafshil, what's not included in that is roasted food or not fully cooked food, undercooked food. Okay, fine. Amar konam tafshil she'eni toim. So we'll say, what happens if a person says, no, I'm sorry, I read that incorrectly. That's hanodim min hamavushal. I'm sorry, not min tafshil. Person says, I make a neder not to get benefit from that which is mavushal, that which is cooked. So we'll say, what does that exclude? It excludes roasted food and undercooked food. So you're allowed to eat roasted food, you're allowed to eat undercooked food. Good. Amar konim tafshil she'eni toim. What happens if a person says, I'm not going to eat tafshil? So we'll say, so what's included in that? Asar b'maise kedera rach umutar ba'ava. It's good. So we'll say, so what happens if you say tafshil? So again, what's interesting to note is these are more inclusive words, right? Mavushal is an inclusive word. Tafshil is an inclusive word. So if you notice what the Mishnah is doing is, instead of telling you all of the things that are included in mavushal, or all the things that are included in tafshil, the easier thing to do is what? Is to tell me what's excluded. So again, if I make a neder not to eat mavushal, so what's excluded? Roasted food, undercooked food. I make a neder not to eat tafshil. So we'll say, so what's excluded? Tavshil shani toim. So what's excluded? Asr b'maaseh kedei rach. So Rabbi say, well, here is what's included. I'm not permitted to eat. Rabbi say, maaseh kedei rach means something liquidy that's made in a pot. So, right, something liquidy, maaseh kedei, something that's made in a pot, that's liquidy. Umutter ba'ava. But I am permitted to go ahead and eat something of a thicker consistency that's made in a pot. So what you begin to see is the definition of tafshil. Definition of tafshil is something that is a little bit more liquidy. Something that's thicker is not called a tafshil. Take a quick look at the Ran again. So the Ran says, Amar konim tafshil sheni toim asar ma'aseh kedei rach. It's the first wide line. Umutter ba'ava. So you're not allowed to eat something liquidy, but you can eat something thicker. Ma'aseh kedei, so I'll say when we speak about, so ma'aseh kedei is kigon chilka, tigris, vitisni, v'ka'amar de'imhu rach aser, aval ava mutter. The Ran's giving away something we're going to see in the Gemara. The haitana komidi demis achla be'rifta tafshil karibei. So I'll say we're going to see something interesting. The definition of a tafshil is any cooked item you normally eat with bread. That's going to be the Gemara's definition. Any cooked item you normally eat with bread, that's called a tafshil. Therefore, again, it would have been customary that something of a more liquidy, of a looser consistency, we would eat with bread. Something of a thicker consistency would not be consumed with bread. He goes on, he says, Ava mutter, the haitana komid dimsach berifta tafshil karile, kidis v'gemara, umaisik dera ava, ba'ape nafshe achli le below pas. Something of a thicker consistency that was made in the pot, you wouldn't normally eat with bread. Good. So back up to the Mishnah. So therefore, if a person says, konim tafshil sheni, I'm not going to eat tafshil, so they are usher to eat something made in the pot with a more liquidy consistency, umutter ba'ava, but they are permitted to go ahead and eat something of a thicker consistency, umutter bebeitza tormuta. They're allowed to eat a beitza tormuta. We'll define these terms in the Gemara. A tormuta egg. Ubedalas haramutza. They could also eat a ramutza gourd. Again, we'll define all of these cases. So we'll say that's case 2. Right? So case 1, hanoja min hamavushal. Case 2, konim tavshil. Hanoja min ma'aseh kedei. We'll say what happens if a person takes a neder not to consume ma'aseh kedei? In other words, this is the term I'm using. I'm making a neder not to get benefit from ma'aseh kedei. Ein aser ella mimaisa resachta. So I'll say ultimately again, I'm only prohibited to eat something. Literally, maisa resachta means something that is boiling. Boiling. Again, we'll define these terms in the Gemara. Amar konim hayori likdera sheni toim. Let's say a person says, I hereby make a neder. I'm not going to eat anything that goes into a pot. So what's the halacha? Aser b'chala mispashlim b'kdera. So we'll say in that case, anything that's made in a pot, I'm not allowed to eat. Okay, good. So we'll say the idea that the Gemara is saying over here, and again we'll more explicitly say this in the idea that the Mishnah is saying is that in Nedarim holkin achar lashon adam. When it comes to Nedarim, we go after the way people define or use their terms. Good. So let's analyze Gemara. So Tanya Rabbi Yoshia oser. So Rabbi Yoshia says it's aser. Now what's aser? If you take again a look in the Ran, so we'll say in the wide lines, 2, 4, 6, 7 lines into the wide lines, Tanya Rabbi Yoshia oser. The Nedarim and Amavusha also b'tzli. So remember again, our Mishnah said that halacha l'maisa, if you make a neder min hamavushal. So this is what I say. I say anything that's mavushal is usher to me. So what did the Mishnah say? How do we define that neder? You are permitted in sli, in something that's roasted, and something that's undercooked. Right? Those are not called mavushal. Says the Gemara, Tanya Rabbi Yoshi oser. Rabbi Yoshia says that even something that's tzli is usher ultimately, again, if you say mavushal. So the Gemara says, why? Even though there's no explicit raya to this, there's a scriptural allusion. Shene amar, vayvashlu esa pesach be'ish kamishpat. So both listen to this. The pasuk says in Divrei Yomim, they cooked the Pesach in fire as is its halacha. Now both saying, remember again, how is the Karban Pesach prepared? The Karban Pesach is tzli, it's roasted. So what do you see from here? That even roasted, and yet the Navi, when describing the preparation of the Karban Pesach, calls it mavushal. So you see from here that even something roasted is called mavushal. Therefore, Rabbi Yoshia holds, that halacha l'maisa, if you are noder min hamavushal, that also includes tzli, also includes something roasted. So what's the machlok? So what are they arguing about? Maybe Rabbi Yoshia Savar, halach achar lashon Torah, the Tana Dilan Savar, Nedarim halach achar lashon b'nei Adam. So we'll say maybe there's a fundamental machlokes over here. And what's the fundamental machlokes? How do we define our terms when it comes to Nedarim? So the Tana of our Mishnah holds that when it comes to Nedarim, holchin achar lashon b'nei Adam. We look at the way a term or a word is colloquially used. We look at how people use it. Whereas Rabbi Yoshia holds no. In defining our terms, how do you define our terms? How does the Torah use it? Maybe that's the machlokes. And therefore, again, I will say, so the Tana of our Mishnah says, when people say mavoshol, they don't mean sli. They don't mean sli. And Rabbi Yoshia holds, but one second, the Torah uses mavoshol as a word for sli. Maybe that's the machlokes. To which the says, no. I will say that is absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. We will say, how do we know that that's absolutely not true? Ultimately, again, because guiding light when it comes to Nedarim is that halacha l'maisa interpretation of Nedarim always goes after how words are colloquially used by people, not by Torah. So what's the machlokes over here? Very simple. Mar kiasrei, umar kiasrei. So I'll say here's the difference. Remember, when you get into the idea that by Nedarim we look at how words are colloquially used, what's the challenging part? Words are used differently in different places. So in Rabbi Yossi's, in Rabbi Yoshia's locale, so mavushal was used to include sli. In the Tana's locale, Tana of our Mishnah, right, mavushal excluded sli. So they just used mavushal in two different days. We'll say, but this is very important. Everyone is in agreement that when it comes to Nedarim, holchin achar loshon b'nei Adam. We go after the way the word is used by people. The machlokas over here is how the word is used. So ba'asri ditana dilan litzli karule tzli ulmavusha karle mavushal. And according to our Tana, I'll say where the Tana lived, Tana of our Mishnah lived in his locale, they called mavushal, and they called tzli tzli. But i.e., mavushal did not include tzli, and therefore if you've made a neder not to eat mavushal, you're permitted to eat tzli. Ba'asri Rabbi Yoshia, in the locale of Rabbi Yoshia, afilu tzli karu mavushal. In the city of Rabbi Yoshia, they even called tzli mavushal. Good. So the Gemara said, well, 1 second. V'hakra nasivla. But 1 second, Rabbi Yoshia brought a pasuk. He brought a pasuk, I will say. So that's pretty significant. So if he's bringing a pasuk, doesn't that indicate to us that halacha l'maisa, this is not a belashon b'nedarim holchin achar belashon b'nei adam, but he's mamish bringing on a pasuk, to which the Gemara says, no, asmachta ba'alma. He didn't mean to bring the pasuk as a proof. He just meant to bring the pasuk as an asmachta. So in other words, I will say, what's driving Rabbi Yoshia over here is in his locale, they used the word mavushal to even include tzli. The pasuk itself is simply an asmachta, simply again like a remez, right? A remez, beautiful. So let's go back there. So we'll say, and by the way, who's right? So the answer is they're both right. In other words, we'll say, so this is very important. So therefore, kind of as we close out this first case, a person says hanodra mina mavushal. So what does that include? What does that include mavushal? And the answer is it depends where you live. And it depends ultimately how the word mavushal is used. So Rabbi Yoshia's locale, mavushal would include sli. In the Tana's locale, it wouldn't include sli. Beautiful. So konam tafshil, so what's the next case? Person says, konam tafshil she'ani toim. Right? I take a neder, I'm not going to eat tafshil. So remember again, the way the Mishnah explained this is, this ultimately again will answer any food made in a pot of a more liquidy consistency, but will not answer something of a thicker consistency. So the Gemara says, but 1 second, but why is that? Vaha mitavshil nadar. In other words, why wouldn't this answer food of a thicker consistency? After all, again, isn't that not called tavshil? In other words, tavshil means something cooked in a pot. So just because something has a thicker consistency, it's excluded from tafshil? That doesn't seem to make so much sense. Amar Abaye, here we go. Haitana komidi dimisachel beirifta tafshil karibei. This is what we saw in the Ran before. That Allah Chalamais will say, what's the definition of a tafshil? So the definition of a tafshil, and again, this is all b'nedarim holchin achar lashon b'nei adam. This all is referencing the idea that by nedarim we look at how a word is used. And according to our Tana, tafshil means something you eat with bread. We eat with bread, and therefore, both say, Now again, now I understand. You would normally eat something that was more liquidy with bread, but something like of a thicker consistency would not be consumed together with bread. Here we go. So the Gemara says, "Hi, right? Svatanya." We learned. So we'll say, by the way, in this case, Vatanya. The Ran points out over here, benichusa. So the Bryce here is coming to support this idea that by definition, a tavshil is something that is normally consumed with bread. Vatanya, we learned, very interesting. Hanoda mina tavshil. If a person makes a neder not to eat tavshil, Asr b'chol minei tavshil. He is not permitted to eat any kind of tavshil. Va'asr b'tzli. He's also not permitted to eat something that is roasted. Ub'shalok, or something about say. So remember, let's go with our definition. Shalok means something that is potentially undercooked. Ub'mavushal, and ultimately again, or something that is cooked. Va'asr b'hitrios rakos. So this is interesting. He says also asr hitrios rakos. If you take a look at the Ran, so we'll say the Ran is 6 lines up from the bottom. But also we're going to look at a couple of Rans over here. V'asr behitrios rakos diluin kitanim. Literally again, small gourds or soft gourds. Shacholin ochlin ban piton. Because they will say when you're sick people would normally eat soft gourds. So the Gemara says, so now the point of that brayso over here, is that halacha l'maisa, you see this lashon of the soft gourds together with the bread. So you see from here that the definition of a tavshil is a food item that you normally eat with bread. So pause here for just a second because we're about to go on a tangent. So we'll say, so therefore the Gemara is suggesting over here is the same way that the definition of mavushal ultimately is dependent on where you live. So tavshil also, but at least according to our Tana, the definition of a tavshil is a cooked item, an item cooked in a pot that is normally consumed with bread. Now, the way our Tana chooses to define that, therefore, is something that is of a looser consistency you would eat with bread. Something of a thicker consistency was not normally consumed with bread. And this Brisa supports this. Now, both say, now what the Brisa is going to do is go on a tangent. Why? Because what the Brisa just gave an example of is eating soft gourd with bread. Sitting off as people who are sick consume. So the Gemara says, whoa, Ini. Now the Gemara is bothered by that sick people eat gourds. So the Gemara says, Ini, Vaha, first wide line, Vaha, Rabbi Yirmiyah chalash, Rabbi Yirmiyah became sick. So he had a doctor make a home visit. The doctor came, Chazak karai, demachas babese. So the doctor walked in and he saw that Rabbi Yirmiyah had squash sitting on the table, a gourd sitting on the table. Shavke v'nafak. The doctor left. Amar malach mosa islay ladein bevesa va'ane olasa. The doctor said, literally, you have the malach hamaves sitting on your table, and you want me to come in to heal you? So apparently, gourd is not good for a chola. So that's what the Gemara is bothered by. So the doctor Mamish refused to administer healing, refused to administer, right, to treat the patient. So we'll say, by the way, what a musar. What a musar. You cannot expect other people to help you if you are not willing to help yourself. And we'll say, how many times do we place our success on the shoulders of others, right? You have to do this. You have to do this. You have to, right? You have to, and again, whatever area of life we're talking about. But often we make our success, right? We say, other people have to help me. Only one thing, I'm not willing to help myself. I'm not willing to make the necessary changes. I'm not willing to make the necessary life adjustments. And it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. If you're not willing to get rid of your life gourd, right? If you're not willing to go ahead and clear out your house, clear out your life from the things which have a detrimental effect on you, no one else could help you. An incredible yisod. So the Gemara goes back to the Gemara says, so what's going on with the squash? Lokasha, haberichichi, haba'ashuni. To which the Gemara says different types of squash. If you look at the Ran again, the Ran says berichichi, 4 lines are from the bottom, malu. Soft squash apparently is good for the chola. Ashuni, Ran says kashin, right? Hard squash is not good for the chola. Okay, so Rava Bar Ula Amar, so we'll say we're still focused on the squash over here. Rava Bar Ula Amar, habikra gufei, habigave dikra. So Rava Bar Ula says, here's the distinction. Ultimately, again, the outer harder part of the squash, that's the part that's not good for a chola. But the inner, softer part of the squash, that is good for the chola. Okay, Dam Rav Yehuda, as Rav Yehuda said, luliva dikra bisilka, luliva dikisna bekusra. Speaking about remedies over here, Rabbi Yehuda said literally again, luliva dekra. If you look at the Ran over here, luliva dekra is masha v'socho. The inner part of squash, eaten together, ultimately again, bislika, with beets, is very healthy. Luliva dekisna bekusra. Similarly again, the inner part of a flax plant, eaten together with kusach. The truth is, Rabbi say it's actually been a while since we've seen kusach, right? But again, the incredible restorative and health benefits of kusach come up all the time. So if you take the inside of a flax plant together with kusach, ultimately again very beneficial to one's health. It was very interesting. But davar zeh, listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda says this thing. There is this medicinal healing. Asr la'omer b'fnei am haaretz. You cannot share this information with an am haaretz. They will say, why can't you share this information with an Am Haaretz? So this is actually incredible. If you take a look at the Ran says over here, "V'davar ze asra li b'fnei Am Haaretz, k'dei shlo ya'akru ha'pishtan lekach." Because otherwise, they're going to uproot all of the flax for medicinal purposes. That's the Ran. Interesting, Rashi says, we're saying a little bit different. Rashi says, the Rush, the Rush, also b'fnei Am Haaretz, the Rush is on the bottom right-hand corner. Also, the of ours, she'aligu al dvarenu, she'dvarim ela afilu hanashim yodos osan. So, according to the Rush, the Amei Aretz will make fun of the rabbis. Why? Because everyone knows this, right? Don't pretend like rabbis, like you found something, like you found gold over here. Everyone knows the medicinal qualities of these items, and therefore, again, the fact that you're spending your time dealing with this indicates that the rabbis have too much free time on their hands. Okay, fine. So as I said, Machlokes Ran and the Rosh, exactly why you shouldn't share it, but you shouldn't share it. Good. Rava Amar, Man Chulin. So by the way, I will say, when we speak about, when Rabbi Yehuda said, or we spoke over here before, that these items have medicinal purposes, who are the cholin that we're speaking about? Who are the sick people? So Rabbanon. I will say this refers to Talmidei Chachamim. Right? The sick people are talking about who need these items for their medicinal purposes are Talmidei Chachamim. So the Gemara says, first I'll take a quick look at the Ran. Man Chulin Rabbanon, last Ran on the Daf. Ran says, Einachinami, the Kari ben Rechichi ben Ashune Kashan Lecholi, the Chikatani Cholin Ochlin ban Piton Lav Chomer. So let's take a step back for just a moment. So remember again, we had the Braisa, and the Braisa itself spoke about the idea that halacha l'maisa, people who are ill eat their gourds with bread. Who are the ill people who are eating gourd? In other words, what type of illness? Okay, so we qualified the inside of the gourd, the outside of the. Who are the sick people that are availing themselves of this remedy? So the Gemara is saying the sick people in question are Talmidei Chachamim. The Ran says, why are Talmidei Chachamim sickly? Look at the Ran. So he says, it's not people who are very sick. Ella man cholin rabbanon dafilu bibriusan hein teshushe koach mipnei shatora mateshes kocham. It will say Talmidei Chachamim are always weaker. Why are they always weaker? Ultimately, again, because Torah, the pursuit of Torah, saps one of their vitality. It's incredible. I will say it's an incredible idea that on one hand we say Torah Hashem Timima Mishivas Nafesh. The Hakadosh Baruch Hu's Torah is complete and beautiful. It restores the soul, but at the same time, the same Torah that restores the soul also saps one of some of their physical vitality. I will say we know that literally again, it's an incredible thing that here the learning of Torah does not necessarily require a physical exertion, but lamaisa, because true Talmud Torah is an all immersive experience. I will say it tells you, by the way, about how a person is supposed to learn. How he's supposed to learn. I will say the goal when you're learning, and this is incredibly hard in our contemporary age, the goal of learning is the avoidance of distraction. That's the goal. To make my learning, and by the way, whether it's for 5 minutes or 5 hours, however much time you're learning, it doesn't make a difference. Whatever amount of time I'm learning, the goal is to make it a fully immersive experience. And when it is truly a fully immersive experience, it's tiring. It's tiring because again, my entire body, my entire essence is involved. And when my entire essence is involved, again, yes, I emerge from it, and to a certain degree, I'm rejuvenated, but I'm also physically tired. It's an incredible thing. So therefore, again, the Gemara says, when we speak about, again, a medicinal healing for those who are ill, and the healing is gourd with bread, it's not about people who are suffering from some type of sickness. It's Talmidei Chachamim. Torah scholars. So Torah scholars who need to go ahead and restore their physical vitality because some of it is sapped as a result. I will say, but isn't it something to strive for? Tell me, is it not the hardest thing for us today to do anything uninterrupted for 5 minutes? To pay attention, real full attention to anything for 5 minutes, fully immersed. I will say, let alone an hour, right? But that's our goal. That's really our goal. Or even if it's not the full hour, be makabel upon yourself. I am going to be fully immersed in whatever it is, Mesilas Yesharim, Daf Yomi, whatever you learn on your own, for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm not going to get distracted. That's a Kabbalah. That's a Kabbalah. I will say, very, I know you think this is a 5 minutes. 5 minutes not to look at something, right? 5 minutes not to pay attention to something else. Impossible. It's easier to finish whole Shas, right? With my Gemara in one hand and whatever else distracts me on the other hand, right? To be fully immersed in something. I will say, but you know how it is. Whatever you do and you're doing something else, you don't get the full experience of it. That's just the way that it works. But fully immersive Torah ultimately, again, is spiritually rejuvenating, but can be physically draining on the other hand as well. So the Gemara goes on. The Gemara says, so Rava Latame, Dama Rava. Rava goes according to his reasoning. What does Rava say? Amud Beis, Keman Maslinon al Kitzri va'amari. Rava say today, who do we daven for? And Rava say, here's what's easy. Here's interesting to note. So Kitziri, Rava says, Kitziri and Mari are both translated as ill, right? Sick. So the way it's understood is like this. Kitziri, Rava say, is a little bit more about someone who's suffering from a particular ailment versus Mari, who is someone who's a bit more sickly, which means they're not suffering from a particular ailment, just in general, they're in a weakened state. So actually the context of this is totally different. The Gemara asks in general, according to who do we daven on a daily basis for people who are ill? Kiman, Rabbi Yossi. So I will say, listen to this. Now take a look at Rash at the Ran for just a moment. You see, this is incredible. So Kiman Matzlinan Kisira Meiri, Kolimos Hashana, Rabbi Yossi, Tara Parakam de Rosh Hashanah, Adam Nidam Bechol Yom. Dila Rabbanim de Islun Dinidam Rosh Hashanah, Kema Shnigmar Dinan Ain't Tfilah Melasa. I will say, this is absolutely incredible. In accordance with whose opinion do we daven for the sick every day? I will say, every day we daven Shemona Azar Rifa'inu. So in accordance with whose opinion do we say Rifa'inu? So I'll say there's a fundamental machlokes in Masechet Rosh Hashanah between Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanon about how judgment works. According to the Rabbanon, we're judged once on Rosh Hashanah for the entire year, and that's it. That judgment is locked in. But I will say, if my judgment for the year is locked in on Rosh Hashanah, does it make sense to daven for a chola every single day? No. Why? Judgment is locked in. So I will say, who do we paskin? Like we actually accept like a little bit of a hybrid model. We pass like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says a person is judged every single day. Adam nidon b'chol yom is judged every single day. Well, if I'm judged every single day, then by definition, what? I have the ability to alter that judgment as well. So in accordance, we'll say, by the way, incredibly profound. So we actually accept both. We accept the fact that a person is judged on Rosh Hashanah, but yet we also believe that a person has the ability to alter that judgment throughout the course of the year through their actions. So we accept a little bit of a hybrid model. But the idea over here is, why do we daven for the sick every day? If a person's year is locked in at Rosh Hashanah, because it sounds like Rabbi Yossi, Adam nidon b'chol, I will say, incredible. Adam nidon b'chol yom. It's a mantra. It's a mantra. Every single day I'm judged for my actions. I will say, that works both ways. If I had a good day yesterday, fantastic, judge me. If I had a bad day yesterday, you know what? Yesterday is yesterday, today brand new day. Adam nidon b'chol yom. So we'll say, but the point the Gemara is making over here is, Shma mina kitziri mamish meri'i rabbanon. The point there, you see in the formulation where the Gemara asks, for whom, according to whom do we daven for the kitziri meri'i, which tells you there's two different levels of illness. Kitziri are the people who have a real illness. Meri'i are the people who are a little bit more sickly. Who are the meri'i? So kitziri mamish. Kitziri means people who are really sick. Meri'i means people who are sickly. Who are the people who are sickly? Rabbanon. Good. So the Gemara says as follows. Umuter ba'ava. So Rav says, remember again, going back to the Mishnah. So the Mishnah said over here that if a person says konam tavshil, I'm not going to eat. I will say, by the way, I'll point out, this doesn't have to mean that every single Talmud Chacham is sickly, right? That's not what. But again, what the Gemara is saying over here is, if you see someone who is steeped in learning, yet they don't seem to have that same level of physical vigor or vitality. And you say to yourself, come on, what are you so tired from? Right? You're not working, you're not this, you're not that. Understand what I'm saying? Fully immersive Torah is spiritually restorative and rejuvenative, but at the same time is saps one of their physical vitality. That's the dynamic that the Gemara, and I will say, if you say to yourself, well, that never happened to me, right? I never learned and then was physically sapped, that's probably because it hasn't been a fully immersive experience. But again, if we allow ourselves, I will say, even just for a few minutes, to experience full immersion without distraction. First of all, besides the fact that the Torah experience itself is more rewarding and more rejuvenating, at the end of the day, I will say, I'll be able to feel the full effects of Torah. Halavai, we should be zocha. Okay, so Gemara goes back to Mutter ba'ava. Torah says, remember again, back to Mishnah. So the Mishnah said, I'm making a neder over here not to eat tavshil. So remember again, the way the Tana of our Mishnah defined tavshil is something that is more liquidy, not a thick item. Not a thick item, meaning something that's normally consumed with bread, but something that's not consumed with bread is not included. So the Gemara says as follows, which is incredible. Masnisin deloki bavloi. Our Mishnah does not reflect the view. So again, our Mishnah holds the definition of a tavshil is something you normally eat with bread. And what do you eat with bread? Food items of a more liquidy consistency. But food items of a thicker consistency are not consumed with bread. So the Gemara says, our Mishnah does not reflect the view of the Bavloim, the Babylonians, Rabbi Zera, Bavloi tipshoi, those foolish Babylonians. What are the foolish Babylonians? The achli lachma belachma. They eat bread with bread. Now, both say, now what does that mean? Take a look at the Ran for just a moment. If you look at the Ran right to the right-hand side, in the beginning of the short lines, Masnisin del Bavloi, Masnisin deshari ava mishum delo misachla berifta. The Mishnah which says that if you take a neder not to eat a tavshil, you're permitted to eat thicker food, right? Because again, people don't eat thicker food with bread. That's not like the Babylonians. Dila Bavloi, the Ran says, Kevan da'achli bahadi rifta tavshil mikri aser. So I will say they eat thick foods with bread. I will say, just understand what we're talking about over here. When the Mishnah is describing thick food, the Ran already said this. They're talking about, if you could imagine, like a thicker porridge, right? It's the food they're talking about is a grain-based food. So normally, if you think about it, a person wouldn't eat a thick grain-based food with bread. Because what is that like? It's eating bread with bread. Right? The Babylonians, or as the Gemara calls them, the foolish Babylonians, ta'achli lachma belachma. They're foolish, they eat bread with bread. So they would eat these thicker grain dishes together with bread. Rav Chisda, so Rav Chisda said, the mashil lahon lahalein nakdani dohotzol. So let's listen to this. Rav Chisda said, I'd like someone to go ahead and ask a question to the affluent people of Hutzal. Now what's going on here? Take a look at the Ran for just a moment. Nakrani, she'ochlim b'nikius. Apparently, again, in the city of Hutzal, you had some high-class people. The Nakranim, I will say, the Ran's version is Nakrani. The Gemara says Nakdani. The idea over here is that in Hutzal, you had these people who were like, because I guess they were affluent, a little bit higher class, the Ran says, she'ochlim b'nikius. Lashon achar nakdani shemedaktikin bachilasan. So these were like the feinschmeckers, right? They knew about meals and about food and about things like this. So Rav Chisda says, do me a favor, go ahead and ask the people ultimately of Hutzal, the Nakdani of Hutzal, about the following. Hadin daisa, hechin ma'alil michla. How should you eat daisa? I'm saying a daisa is a dish of cooked grain. It's a cooked grain dish. How should you eat daisa? Dechiti balachma dechiti, udisari balachma desari. So should you eat wheat daisa with wheat bread and barley daisa with barley bread? O dilma dechiti b'desari b'dechiti. Or maybe you should eat again wheat daisa with barley bread and barley daisa with wheat bread. So I'll say, so interestingly enough, over here, daisa is normally a thicker consistency. And yet, what do you see over here? Rav Chisda saying, ultimately, again, what kind of bread should you eat your daisa with? So you see over here that the Babylonians would eat even a thicker grain-based item together with their bread. Rava achle b'chasisi. So I'll just tell you very quickly. It's interesting, an interesting idea over here that that this idea. It's always fascinating in general when the Gemara speaks about the Babloi Tipshoi, the foolish Babylonians. It seems like such a I mean, there was a certain amount of animosity between the Eretz Yisrael Jews and between the Babylonian Jews. But it is interesting that it's recorded a statement like that, the foolish Babylonians. And what makes them so foolish? They eat their bread with bread. I mean, again, like, okay, it's just a dietary difference, right? It sounds interesting that they would say Babloi Tipshoi. So also I came across a beautiful idea by the Nedarim. So the Ger Rebbe says something amazing. What does it mean that the foolish Babylonians eat their bread with bread? Rabbi said, listen to this. This is absolutely incredible. He says, "Shekavanas tivrei Chazal ala tifshus shel adam she'ochlim kedei sheyuchlu le'echol od." So the Nedarim says the Gemara is coming to talk about people who eat only so that they can only eat more. Meaning what? Let's listen to this. Ploni, listen how beautiful this is. Ploni kam b'boker v'yotzei l'avod. You have a guy who wakes up in the morning to go to work. Nishaloso. We ask him, tell me, why are you going to work? L'shem ma amalat. Why are you going to work? Why are you working so hard? V'yashiv kedei sheyeh li kesef la'ochel. Look, I need money because I have to buy food. V'l'shem ma'ata ochel. So ultimately, again, why do you eat? Why do you eat? V'yashiv kedei sheyeh l'koach lavod. So that I have the koach to work. So when he's going to work, why are you going to work? So I should be able to eat. Right? When he's eating, why are you eating? So that I should be able to go to work. Hari lefanenu ma'agal tipshi. The Nedarim says, what is this person stuck in? They're stuck in a cycle of foolishness. Hamaschil belechem, v'nigmar belechem. It's a cycle of life that begins with bread and it ends with bread. No, Rabbi says the Nedarim something so beautiful. Rabbi say, who's the Bavli tipshai? Now, Bavli, Rabbi says, from Lashon of Bala, someone who's absorbed. Someone who's too absorbed into this world, into the gashmas, the physicality of this world. So you ask him, what does he do? He eats his bread with bread. Right? Why are you going to work? To get bread. Why are you eating bread? To go to work. My entire life just becomes about the pursuit of bread. That's all life is about. I go to work to get the bread. I eat the bread to go to make money for more bread. That's Bavloi Tipshoi. That's what I say, Bavloi from Lashon of Bala, from Lashon of absorbed. Someone who's so immersed just in the dynamics of Olam Hazeh that their entire life just becomes about getting more money for bread. That's all. That's all. Everything is this circle of life. That's tipshus. That's foolishness. And the boss say how easy it is to fall into a cycle like this without even realizing. I wake up to go to work to make money for bread. I eat bread so I could go back to work and make more money. Again, making money is fantastic. We should all be zocha. But the shaila is, what's my goal in life? What am I working towards? If the goal is just to work to eat and then eat to work, then what higher purpose ultimately, again, does my life serve? One who gets absorbed into that dynamic, says the Chidush Harim, unfortunately, is suffering from systemic tipshus. Incredible. Let's go back there. Says the Gemara. So Rava achli bechasisi. So Rava would go ahead and eat his bread with chasisi. The Ran says over chasisi is kemach shel kloyos, flour of oven-dried kernels. Okay? Great story, I will say. So again, the point I will say the Gemara is telling over here is that clearly the Babylonians did have different eating habits, and they did eat even thicker grain items together with bread. Let's listen to this story. Rabbi Bar Huna found Rav Huna, and Rav Huna was eating daisa. Remember again, daisa is like a porridge. He was eating daisa with his fingers. Amar Leah, why are you eating daisa with your hands? Amar Leah, Haki Amar Rav, this is what Rav said, daisa be'etzba'asei basim. Eating daisa with your hands makes it taste better. Right? This is what he said, right? Apparently daisa tastes better with your hands. V'chol shekain bitartin, v'chol shekain bitlas. Right? All the more so ultimately, again, if you're eating it with two people, right? If you're eating it with three people. Okay? So Amar le Rav l'chiyah berei. So Rav said to Chiyah, his son. V'chein Amar le Rav Huna l'Rabba berei. Rav Huna said to his Rabbi, his son, Mizamnin l'cha l'mechal daisa ad parsa. If someone invites you over to eat daisa, you should travel up to a parsa. Meaning what they were saying to their sons is daisa is a very beneficial food item. And so if someone invites you over for daisa, you should travel. Even if it requires you to travel to eat, you should travel. Lemechle bisra de Torah, somebody invites you over for a steak, right, for ox meat, at tlasa person. Even 3 parsa, you should travel for that. I will say the idea being this wasn't like a din in free food. Right? This was a din ultimately again in these are beneficial foods, and therefore again it's worth it to exert yourself to travel to be able to partake of foods that are beneficial for you. Rav said to Chia's son. Ravuna the Rabbi. Others say it was Rafuna to Rabbi his son. Kol medam lo tiflot kamei rabcha. In general, don't spit in front of your Rebbe. Others will say, if you have to spit, right? If you have to spit, so in general, it's an important etiquette thing. Don't, I don't know what the, I don't know, it's obviously it's the spitting itself. It's also the, what do you call it? The process of like, right, heaving up the, whatever, like the, I don't want to make the sound, but you understand, right? In other words, right, the heaving up of phlegm, or right? Don't do that, right? Don't do that in front of your Rebbe, and certainly, right? In other words, here's just a sidebar of etiquette, right? Don't do it in front of anyone, right? In other words, if you have to hock something up, go somewhere else and do that, right? But Lamai said, don't do it. But here the Gemara is speaking about specifically in front of one's Rebbe. In front of one's Rebbe, one should not spit in front of one's Rebbe. Lebar, the exception to it. Lebar minkra v'daisa shein doma lepsilta shel aver. It's interesting. The exception I will say is if you have phlegm or spit as a result of eating gourd or as a result of eating daisa. That type of stuff you should expel from the body as quickly as possible. So ultimately, again, why? Literally, again, shein doma lepsilta shel aver. They're like lead. In other words, apparently these are items that are not easily digestible, so keeping them in your body could actually be detrimental. So if you have some residue that needs to, or something that needs to get out of your body, spit it out. Va'afilu kamei shavar malka palot. You could even do that in front of King Shapur. I don't know if that would be advisable to do it in front of King Shapur, but the Gemara is making an example over here that even in front of a melech, he'd be permitted to spit under these circumstances. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, this is a great story. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, chad achil daisa be'etzba aseh, v'chad achal b'chutza. Listen to this. So Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda were eating daisa together. One was using his fingers, and one was using a piece of bark. Right? So he was using the bark, right, like as a spoon. So watch this. Amrli da'achal b'chutza da'achal be'etzba aseh. So the one who was eating with the bark said to the one who was eating with his fingers, Ad masay ata machilani tzavascha. How long do I have to eat your dirt? Right? Now I will say, what was he mean? In other words, what he was saying is, you're sticking your hands into the daisa. Right? So the Ran says over here, the dirt ultimately, again, the dirt refers to the dirt under the fingernails. Right? How long do I have to actually eat your dirt? You're sticking your hands into the daisa. I'm eating your dirt. Amar le da'achal b'atzba'aseh le da'achal b'chutza. So the guy who was eating with his hands said to the guy who was eating, to the one who was eating with the bark, Ad maseh ata ma'achilani rokach. How long do I have to eat your saliva? Right? You're double dipping. Right? In other words, you're putting, I will say, you're putting your bark, you're putting your spoon right back in there. So you're getting my fingernail dirt, which may or may not be going into the daisa. I am most definitely getting your saliva. I will say, what's the point of a story like this? What's the point of a story like this? I will say the point of the story is very simple. Be conscious of other people. Be conscious of other people. Sometimes we do things with a total disregard for others. I'm just going about my business. I'm doing my thing. This is how I do it. I eat dice with my fingers. I eat dice with bark. Be conscious, cognizant, and considerate of other people. And even if you normally do something a certain way, if you are involved together with someone else, it's not just enough to say, well, this is the way that I do it. A person must be fully cognizant, conscious, and considerate. All right, so we have to stop over here for today. Meretz Hashem, we'll pick up more incredible Gemara tomorrow. Let's say Shkoyach. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, Meretz Hashem. I'm gonna build it up on the WhatsApp. If I say it now, everyone's gonna forget about it. Shalom Aleichem.